everyone, welcome to Adventures in Everyday Cooking, where every day can be an adventure in your kitchen. My name is Heather, and today we are doing a request from Krista Nickerson, 693. She asked that we do an Acadian recipe called Rappie Pie. Now, I had no idea what Rappie Pie was, and you guys, I was in for an adventure, that's for sure. Now, let me give you a little background because this is not going to be your regular video. Oh no, this is going to be a little different because allergies were hitting me hard and I completely lost my voice. However, I had all these potatoes and I had all this time because I wasn't going anywhere because I thought I had the bug. And so I recorded this without seeing my face because my face was completely puffy. I had no voice, but I wanted to do this adventure before my potatoes went bad because you guys, it took a lot of potatoes, 10 pounds of potatoes. So you better believe that I was ready to do this adventure with or without my voice. So now obviously I have my voice back. I'm going to show you what I did. I'm going to talk over it as me right now. And I took copious notes because I knew that this video would not have my face and therefore I was not talking. So I took notes and I'm going to show you and show Krista how we did what I thought. And you guys, this may be an adventure you want to try. So let's start on this adventure. So if you're going to make Rappie Pie, which you definitely can, but you'll hear my notes later, this is what you're going to need. You are going to need a full 10 pounds of potatoes, 1 whole chicken or about 5 pounds, 1 onion quartered, a heaping tablespoon of salted green onions. Now, salted green onions is a recipe in and of itself. They're actually called Acadian salted onions. They actually are pretty cool. I use them in another couple of recipes, and I will show you the jar that I have in my refrigerator right now and tell you the errors that I made in using those in a second. But you're gonna want those. 20 cups of water, half a teaspoon of salt, 1/4 of a teaspoon of pepper, 6 tablespoons of butter, 6 slices of uncooked bacon, and you're gonna want it chopped, and butter for greasing your pan. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of things in a recipe, right? It's not. And yeah, I don't know. Let's just get started. Let's go. Okay, you guys, so this is gonna be a little bit different than it usually is. I'm gonna be sitting here, I have my computer here, I'm gonna watch the video that you're watching, drink some coffee, and I have some sourdough bread here also that I'm babysitting for the moment because they need to get back into their bannetons to finish their final shape and then get cold. Anyway, I'm just gonna watch the video with 0 sound. So, the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is get your chicken all cut up if it's not already, and you're gonna want to add 20 cups of water to your big pot. Add in the quartered onion, the salted green onions, and the salt and pepper, along with all of that chicken. You're gonna wanna boil this now about an hour, which give or take, depending on how the chicken was cut and how small it is and if you use bone chicken or if you did not. Now, you definitely want to use boned chicken for this. In fact, I used the cut up quarters that you can buy at the store instead of a whole chicken, and that equaled about 5 pounds. So salted green onions, let's talk about that for a second. So here are my salted green onions, and I'm going to show you the salted green onions the day that I made the Rappie Pie. And what you're going to need for the salted green onions are green onions and large grain kosher salt. You're going to want to start this the day before. So these had to sit in the refrigerator for 24 hours in order for them to be preserved and have that salty taste. So I have since added more scallions to my jar and then added more salt and shook it up. There's a lot of recipes that you could use this in. My only recommendation is be sure to rinse your onions before you use them. I didn't know that bit of information. I mean, you'd think that you should, and I used them in something and it was way too salty and it was horrible and we threw that away. So learn from my mistake. The first time I used these, I forgot to rinse them. So You can use these like regular scallions. Just rinse them off first and be sure to adjust your seasoning from there. So let's go ahead and get back to the video where I'm adding these into the pot and just showing you what they look like. And for this, we're not going to remove the salt at all because we want that salt inside the broth. And heaping tablespoon, I don't know what that is. That looked more like 2 tablespoons to me, but it's fine. So now we're gonna bring that to a boil and let it boil until the chicken is done. All right, so those of you who wanna know if you can do this in the Instant Pot, you certainly can. I did find some recipes where you could do it kind of like a soup broth idea. Get all of the same ingredients into your Instant Pot, turn it on soup or broth, and set it for 30 minutes. And then you're done with that boiling. You don't have to sit over it for an hour. It's done. And the broths taste identical. You would not know that one was made on the stove and one was made in the Instant Pot. And dare I say, the one in the Instant Pot tasted a little bit better. Maybe it's my mind, but I don't know. It tasted better. I can't help it. It tasted better. Okay, now that your broth or whatever, if you decide to do it in Instant Pot or in the stove, now that it's ready to go and it's going, you need to go ahead and get your potatoes ready. Now, this recipe said to grate your potatoes, and 10 pounds of grated potatoes, that was gonna be an exercise in patience. But I work smarter, not harder, and so I used my food processor. So into the food processor, my 10 pounds of potatoes went, and then directly into a cheesecloth or some kind of fine mesh. What I used was a regular kitchen towel that was really, really thin, and I could get all of the water out. You want to get as much water out of these potatoes as humanly possible. So we're talking squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and get everything out because you're gonna want it to be as dry as possible. Now, once your chicken and broth is done, this is where things got a little dicey for me. I read these directions. I watched people doing it. I did my homework on this, but I still got it wrong. So the directions say remove the cooked chicken from the broth mixture and allow chicken to cool before shredding it into bite-sized pieces. That all I did just fine. And then you're gonna want to preheat your oven to 350 and grease your baking dish. I use the big Pampered Chef cast iron baking dish. I think it's like 13 by 17 or something huge because you're gonna make a lot of this. So 9 by 13, it will take 2 9 by 13s or it will take one really big other dish. The thing that was important here was that your broth needs to be piping hot. Now mine was pretty hot because it had just come off the stove, but I don't know if it was hot enough because it's basically going to start the cooking of those potatoes before you actually cook the dish. So make sure your broth is boiled and ready to go according to your directions. If it has cooled too much, go ahead and bring it back to a boil because you really do want this to be very hot. So what we're gonna do now is we are going to add broth to our potato mixture. Now, let me read for you the instructions and you're gonna see me do something very different. It says, stirring constantly, add your boiling broth 1 cup at a time to your potato pulp. The consistency will be runnier with the more broth you add. So be sure to stop when it's similar to porridge. I did not stop. I forgot this step and I just added the whole darn thing. Don't do that. Add less, don't do that. And make sure your broth is boiling. So those are my 2 errors that I realized mid-adding the broth to the potato pulp. I was like, oh no. Like as I was stirring it, I'm like, this does not look like theirs. Number 1, it wasn't boiling, so why would it? And then number 2, yeah, it was my first time. It's fine. So then once you have this porridge type mixture, which obviously I did not get that because I didn't follow the directions fully, you pour half the potato mixture into the greased pan, which we greased with butter, and you add your chicken scattered over the top of that half of the mixture. So we have the potato pulp, and now we're gonna put the chicken all over the top. Also, removing all of that chicken from the bone was a little bit frustrating because I felt like if I would have just used, you know, boneless chicken, then I could have just chopped it up. But you kind of want this recipe. When I was reading about it, this recipe was actually designed for kind of Depression era time frame. It was like 1936 or so. And it was using the things that you had on hand. So as a luxury this day and age, we can buy boneless chicken and we can buy chicken broth. But this is such a fantastic recipe because you use the whole chicken, make the broth, then use the chicken and use the broth and use the potatoes, which everybody had potatoes back then. So this was a very, very easy dish to make. And I think we figured it out. It's like $5 to make the whole dish. That's really impressive for a Depression era recipe because that means it was only cents to make back then. And most people had potatoes growing in their gardens and they had their own chickens. So this was really one of those recipes that had it all and then some. And then we're going to top the remaining potato mixture over the top and smooth it out as best as you can. Now, when I was looking at this recipe online, it really looked like there was cheese on it. And I feel like adding cheese to this dish would have brought it to another level. However, there's no cheese on this. It's literally just cooked potatoes, chicken with that broth, and some recipes, not all of the ones. The recipe that I took this from loosely was Yarmouth and AcadianShores.com. They did not have the bacon edition, but I saw several people who did bacon. Bacon, chicken, potatoes, they all go together. That sounded fantastic, and I thought that it would just bring it up that notch that I wanted. Now, so if you're going to do the bacon, chop it up, make sure it is raw. And the reason is because this dish cooks for a long time. So raw bacon, that's what you're gonna want. So add your chopped bacon to the top of your smoothed out mixture. And then we're gonna top it alongside pats of butter. And when I say pats of butter, it's 6 tablespoons of butter or so. Some recipes said 6 tablespoons, some said 8 tablespoons, some said a whole cup of butter. So you do you. I put 6 tablespoons because that's what Yarmouth and Acadian Shores recommended, so that's what we used. And now comes the baking. So your preheated oven is gonna be preheated at 350, and now you're gonna bake it for 2 or 3 hours. 2 or 3 hours. Or until the bacon is cooked and everything looks brown and crispy. Now, at the 2-hour mark, I checked on my casserole, my rappie pie, and stuff wasn't browning very much. And I was actually worried that it would burn, but nothing was browning very much. But by the 3rd hour, I feel as though it was getting a little bit more brown, and I was really happy with the color that was starting to come out. However, it still needed some time, probably another half an hour or so before I felt like the bacon was done and the potatoes were browned even a little bit. And let me show you what it looked like when it's coming out of the oven. And here it is after it came out of the oven. As you can see, I do not have nearly the brown that some of these pictures, let me show you, mine looks nothing like that. But that could be because I had too much broth, and so that could not cook kind of brown as nicely as maybe it might have. But it looks, I mean, there's bacon on it. It looks fantastic, right? It should have been fun. I mean, like, I don't know. And as you can see from the cross section right here, very porridge-like on the sides, and the top is a little bit crispy, but I don't know. Here I am cutting into it, and I'm a little worried because when I'm cutting it, it's not very firm. Like, I don't think I'm gonna get out a whole piece the way that I've seen it in the pictures that you just saw. Instead, it's kind of coming out a little sloppy, which could be because I put in too much broth. Okay, I'll give it that. So instead I used a huge spatula to try to get this whole thing out. And you can see kind of in that close-up view that it is so wet. And again, probably my bad. Probably my bad. It's fine though. It's fine. Because it looked a lot like porridge. So maybe it was right. And I was feeling very confident at this point. Now, note that since I was sick, I couldn't taste really, really well. But my husband and my son tasted it, and I have their notes here as well. So let's get into it. All right, so here we have another close-up. It kind of reminds us of lutefisk, the way that it's kind of gelatinous like that. But I'm in for it. I've decided that I'm gonna taste it and it's gonna be delicious. And I realize at this point that I don't have sour cream and it really needs something because I didn't like it very much. In fact, I walked away to spit it out. It does need a little salt, little more salt than it called for. So this called for a half a teaspoon of salt. I'm pretty sure that it needs probably twice as much salt or even more because it's potato. It also definitely needed the sour cream. And so here I am again, trying it with a little more salt and some sour cream. There's my healthy bite. With the sour cream, I thought it tasted much, much better. But as I'm going through it and I'm eating it, I'm a little bit confused at the lack of flavor that I am tasting in this. I feel like it's a really good base recipe, but I feel as though more seasonings really needed to be added to this. So I feel like if you were to add just a base of seasoning, so like put some more seasonings in that broth or anything, I feel like it would be better. It was not something that I would ever make again or ever eat again. However, my husband ate the whole rest of this. And here are some of his notes. He had a second helping the first time we ate it, and he said it was really like wet hash browns, which is not all bad because there was some crispy bits on the top, but also that wetness on the bottom. It was really unsettling a little bit, but it wasn't terrible. The chicken had a tuna-like texture after being boiled or Instant Potted for all of that time and then being baked again for 2 to 3 hours. It really took on that really, really soft texture like tuna did. That there again, not really bad. He did feel as though that it needed a lot more help. So he put on some Tabasco. He also thought that it could use some cheese because, hello, potatoes, cheese, like really, it should have probably had cheese. My son said it really needed more chicken and less potatoes. He also said he would have liked more bacon, maybe mixed throughout the whole thing. So I feel as though if you maybe cooked some, like pre-cooked some bacon and then didn't pre-cook the other stuff and mixed the bacon in with the potatoes during that, broth boiling section, maybe you could get some more bacon flavor in there. It's possible. He also said it was lacking some acidity, which I totally agree with. There was nothing to bring acid to this dish whatsoever. We had just broth, we had just potatoes, and we had just chicken. And so all of it was kind of bland and it just lacked a little bit of that acid hit. So that's when they added the Tabasco and it upped it quite a bit. In fact, with the Tabasco flavor, they were like, this is actually pretty good. So I propose that if for some reason the depression hits again and I feel the need to make this again, I think that I would mix in some Tabasco flavor because that Tabasco flavor really did give it a nice little hit that we thought that it needed. I would also skip the chicken altogether and do ham instead, kind of like a scalloped potatoes. Maybe that's blasphemous, maybe not. but I would put a ham layer in there instead because ham tends to take a lot more heat, a lot more nicely, and it will retain its texture a little more. Even if it was cubed into pieces and mixed all together like a casserole, I feel like, wow, that would be nice and delicious. Now, that all being said, my son did not like the final taste of this dish. He said he would never eat it again. However, my husband, after the Tabasco and the extra cheese and the sour cream, he said if it was served to him, he would definitely eat it again. Okay, let me just tell you that if I go to the Acadian shores and they serve me rappie pie, I will 100% eat it again. However, here in this house, the amount of effort it took for me. Now, I feel as though maybe the effort was more because I was sick, but it was a lot of effort. That's why it's so big, because I don't know. That being said, I'm glad I made it. Have you ever had rappie pie before? If you have, how'd I do? Besides the fact that I didn't do the potatoes quite right, is that what it looks like when it comes out? Because I looked at the other pictures. You saw the other pictures. It doesn't look the same. It looks very different. So I don't know. Did I do something wrong? I followed the recipe. I only added the bacon. So I don't know. But everybody should have some salted Acadian green onions in their refrigerator. It's so handy. Anytime I have some offcuts of green onions that didn't get used, I throw them in there, top it with salt, shake it up, and boom. I have preserved onions in my refrigerator year round. I love it. So if anything, what I got from this recipe, Krista, is these salted green onions. I will forever be in your debt for introducing them to me. Now, like I said, please rinse them before you use them in some dishes or adjust your salt accordingly. All right, you guys. Well, if you enjoyed that video, give it a like. Don't share it with anyone. I don't think that they'd want to have rappie pie, but if you have rappie pie, I would love to know how your family makes it and if this even measured up at all, because I don't know. It was a great adventure and I so appreciate it, Kristen. I appreciate your guys' thoughts and your comments, and every adventure that you want to see me do, I am totally in for. Like, for instance, rappie pie. Though I will say, I really did think I was being punked at some point. I was like, okay, she was being silly when she told me to do this, didn't she? But we'd have it again. I just would make it again. I'll have it in the Acadian shores. In fact, maybe that's where I'll go next. I've never been up there, so I have friends up there. So Lynn, maybe I'll come for a visit and you can introduce me to authentic rappie pie. All right, you guys. Well, we'll see you on the next adventure. Bye.